And now to our interview segment. My guest was the pioneer chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association's section on business law. He's now a special advisor at the international level that's talking about the International Bar Association. He was also recently honored by the federal government of Nigeria with the National Productivity Order of Merit (NPOM) award. The awards were aimed at institutionalizing productivity consciousness and excellence in service among workers and organizations in both the public and private sectors of the economy. Now, whether it is in the power sector where it consults and advises on power agreements and financing, or in the health sector with the Ebola scare, or even in the legal sector, Mr. Etomi believes that Nigeria and Nigerians should take a leadership role on the continent. And these and more form the core of our interaction in this interview. November 1, 2003, privatization of the power sector. We talked about that last year, towards the end of last year. I want you to tell us the challenges of integrating private sector discipline and style with what used to be a government utility. How well has that been dealt with? And we also know that for nearly 30 years, that sector was neglected. And part of the conditions for the takeover was that the private companies would invest some as much as $250 million over a 5-year period into reworking some of the losses that we've seen in the sector, technical losses, commercial and collection losses, and all of that. Give us an update of where we are, with the power sector reforms and what has happened so far.
First and foremost, I want to state categorically that there should be absolutely no apologies for the reform in the sector. This is the only way we should go. If we're going to see total turnaround, given the importance of power to everything we do, we just must get to that point in our national lives where we can be guaranteed 24-hour supply of electricity, because then you can plan around just about anything you want to do. Most of the commanding heights of your economy, your telecoms, your banking, they all rest on power. Your SMEs, their growth is going to be determined by power. So power is crucial. Now, we all know that government in business is a very difficult proposition. And given the examples we've seen with the success of the telecom sector, the banking sector, there must be a similar thing in the power sector, which is why these reforms is the right way to go. But having said that, are we getting it at the speed we should get it? And that's why I told you in our first interview that from independence, when the government was largely responsible for the supply of power to what we had it here, there's been very little by way of new processes, improvements in the sector. And this has been particularly bad in the last 20 to 30 years. So it's like finding yourself 100 feet below the ground. When you manage to dig yourself up to 50, it will not show immediately because you're not yet on the surface. That's what's happening with the power privatization. There is a lot going on, I can tell you. There is a lot going on. First of all, many of the privatized companies were obliged to keep the workforce for 6 months and then determine whom they want and whom they do not want, anxiety and all that. So there were labor issues to contend with. Side by side, you had to bring in technical experts to come, and then you need to blend those ones with the existing expertise that was there, because local expertise is still important. And we must acknowledge that notwithstanding the difficulties we had with the power sector, there are a lot of well-trained Nigerians whose legacy knowledge would be very beneficial to the reform process. But blending the two also has its own challenges, but that must be done. Then don't forget, for many of the DISCOs and GENCOs, just like we saw with the banking and telecoms reform, they are trying to modernize their operations, which means the future belongs to the younger generation. So there's going to be a totally new workforce made up of younger people with more modern habits, more driven, to success. Their benchmark for success is making sure that the challenge of giving light to Nigerians is achieved.
That's what Nigerians are interested in.
Baseline, and that's what's going to go on. Now, on the CAPEX side that we talked about, $250 million, the spending has already begun.
So we've seen that kind of investment.
Yes, oh yes, it's phenomenal. I mean, and the banks have been very supportive. We must give Nigerian banks kudos for the support they've given to the power sector reforms. Those are coming in. But like I told you, it's like coming out of a big tunnel. It takes you a while before you get to the surface. But trust me, a lot is going on. In terms of the discos, for example, I know the heart of the business is the meters, because it's the meters that give you certainty about what you give and what somebody consumes. Right now, most of those meters, 80% of the meters are not functional. They're not giving you accurate readings. So there are too many estimated bills, to the annoyance of consumers and even the discos alike. It allows for crooks to meander between the crevices, and everybody is a loser. So the metering plan, many of the discos are rolling out their metering plans to see how they can totally change their meters, especially to the prepaid platform, so that everybody knows this is what I'm paying for and this is what I'm getting. Most of the new meters will be tamper-proof, and most of these spaghetti, funny connections that you have will be a thing of the past. Yes, and then before you then graduate to the smart meter era. So a lot of that is going on the disco side, that's the distribution side. On the transmission side, which is still largely left with the government, as you know, Manitoba Hydro are the managers. They too are up in their game. And recently the government announced a huge investment in new transmission lines, because that's important. Think about the transmission lines as your superhighway to ferret electricity from when it's generated to the distribution points. Again, like with all the other systems, they were not improved upon before now. So even if you have the generating capacity, as we should soon have in the coming future, evacuation is a challenge. So you must build. It's like your Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, which was 2 lanes when it was built, which was good for the time. But today, even 6 lanes on either way is still not enough and all that. It's just think about transmission in that light. So the government is investing. They are going to be building new transmission lines so they can evacuate a lot of the power that is now being in the works for generation. And talking about generation, the generating companies, remember they are being supported by the World Bank for most of their performance guarantees, which is important to giving confidence to the sector. But then there's the gas which they need to fire most of the thermal plants. At this point, we have 2 sources of power. We have the hydro, which depends on your seasons. One of the reasons we're enjoying steady electricity supply is because the rainy season is still there, so there's high level of water to support the hydro plants. But there's also the thermal plants, which is supported by gas. The government has done a lot to reduce the gas pipeline vandalization, so there is greater gas supply. Again, this is converging with the high water tide, which is why there's generally more supply. But having said that, total availability is still 4,000 megawatts. That's nothing, absolutely nothing. For years, so absolutely, Lagos alone needs 10,000 megawatts. So what's 4,000 for the whole country? So I know the match is to, in the not too distant future, move up to 10 and then to 40. Now, with 40, you need the transmission networks.
So that's
the
what's hindering
expansion of the distribution networks too, not just because most of the distribution networks that you have are around for limited capacity. Take Eco Disco and Ikeja Disco, for example. The most of them can take is like 700 to 800 megawatts performing at optimum levels. Right now, they get between 300 and 400. So whilst there's still room for them to get up to the installed capacity, there is room for even more expansion. These people should be moving to 4,000, 5,000, to the capacity to hold that sort of electricity, which you then distribute to consumers.